The penthouse was silent except for the rain hammering against the floor-to-ceiling windows. I'd left the charity gala early, a headache blooming behind my eyes. Adam had texted that he'd catch up later. He always said that. I stepped into the living room and froze. Adam, my husband of 7 years, was kissing my sister Vanessa on our couch. His tailored suit jacket draped carelessly on the armrest. Her hand was tangled in his dark hair. Their laughter, breathless and knowing, cut through the ambient jazz still playing from the speakers. My parents sat across from them in the oversized velvet chairs, champagne flutes raised, smiling like spectators at a private theater. Like this was expected. Like this was entertainment. Madeline, my mother said, her voice dripping with faux sympathy. You came home early. My father didn't even look up. Adam's face went pale, but not apologetic. Defensive. That was worse. It's not what you think, he said, the oldest lie in existence. My sister laughed. Actually laughed. It's exactly what she thinks, Adam. And frankly, Madeline, we're relieved you finally know. 7 years of sneaking around? Exhausting. The words hit like physical blows. 7 years. Not months. Years. We tried to tell you gently, my mother continued, taking a delicate sip of champagne. But you're so fragile, so sensitive. We didn't want to break you. Fragile. That's what they'd always called me. The invisible daughter. The one who didn't quite fit the Hart family mold of ruthlessness and ambition. I was the liability. The mistake. I didn't scream. Didn't cry. Didn't throw the champagne bottle through the window the way my body begged me to. Instead, I felt something crack open inside me, not my heart, but something far more dangerous. A door. And behind it, a voice that whispered, they're going to regret this. My fingers trembled as I gripped my clutch. I see. Don't be dramatic, Adam said, finally standing, trying to approach me. We can work through this. We're all adults here. I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing. The man I'd married, supported through business school, stood by while his company nearly imploded, wept with during his mother's illness. He was hollow. They all were. Don't, I said quietly when he reached for me. Don't say another word to me. None of you. I turned and walked out, leaving the door open behind me. The taxi driver didn't ask questions when I gave him the address of the Riverside Motor Lodge, a one-star establishment on the outskirts of the city. Rain streaked the windows. I watched the familiar neighborhoods disappear, replaced by industrial warehouses and flickering neon signs. The room smelled like stale cigarettes and broken dreams. Beige wallpaper peeling in the corner. A double bed with a floral comforter that had seen better decades. A window air conditioning unit that groaned like it was dying. I locked the door, engaged the chain, and sat on the edge of the bed. Then I broke. Not in the elegant, tearful way people describe in movies. I sobbed, great, ugly, heaving sobs that came from the deepest part of my chest. I cried for 7 years of wasted love. For every time Adam had held me while secretly holding my sister. For every holiday where my parents watched me smile while they plotted this revelation with cruel precision. I cried for the girl I'd been, the one who wanted to believe her family loved her despite their constant criticism. The one who thought if she was just good enough, kind enough, patient enough, they'd finally see her worth. That girl was gone. By midnight, the tears had stopped. My head pounded. My eyes were swollen. I sat in the dark, listening to the hum of the faulty air conditioning and the distant sound of cars passing on the highway. That's when it came to me, not like a lightning strike, but like a slow-burning fuse being lit deep in my belly. They thought they'd destroyed me. They thought they'd proven what they'd always believed, that I was weak. Invisible. Dispensable. They had no idea what they'd just created. I pulled out my phone. Blocked Adam on every platform. Then, one by one, my parents. Vanessa. Every aunt, uncle, and cousin who'd ever made me feel like an outsider. Then I opened my laptop and began to write. Not a suicide note. Not a begging letter. A list. Everything I need to become untouchable. At 3 a.m., I remembered. My grandmother, my father's mother, whom I'd actually loved, had passed away 3 years ago. I'd been the only one at her funeral who wept. The rest of my family had been disappointed she hadn't left more money. But Grandma Helen had left me something. $40,000, placed in a trust one could access at any time. She'd attached a handwritten note, for when you finally decide to leave them, my darling. I know you will one day. Be brave. I'd been so blinded by family obligation, by the need to be accepted, that I'd never touched it. The account statement was still in my email. At 4 a.m., I transferred the money to a separate savings account. $40,000. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a seed. Then I made another list, a different one. Skills I needed to learn. Businesses to research. Markets ripe for disruption. And underneath it all, I wrote one word in capital letters. Leverage. The apartment I rented was small, a studio in an unfashionable part of town where a month's rent cost less than the shoes I used to casually purchase. Peeling paint. Flickering overhead lights. A stove that only worked if you kicked it 3 times. It was perfect. I spent 14 hours a day at the public library, devouring books. Lean startup. The intelligent investor. Competing against luck. The psychology of money. I filled 2 notebooks with notes, strategies, breakdowns of market trends. At night, I worked part-time as a data analyst for a small consulting firm, $18 an hour, but it provided structure and a paycheck. My apartment walls became covered with printouts, charts, margin calculations. 3 months in, I made my first investment, $5,000 in an undervalued tech startup I'd identified through careful research. The company was led by 2 brilliant MIT graduates being shut out by traditional venture capital because they didn't have the right connections or pedigree. They had something better, a revolutionary approach to renewable energy storage. No one was paying attention yet. Except me. 8 months after leaving Adam, I was working late at the library when I heard a familiar voice. Madeline Hart. I thought that was you. I looked up from my laptop. Lucas Chen. I hadn't seen him in 5 years, not since college, before Adam, before I'd become so consumed with fitting into my family's expectations that I'd lost touch with everyone who actually mattered. Lucas had always been brilliant. Quiet. The kind of person who saw 3 moves ahead. He'd been my best friend once, before I'd let my husband isolate me from anyone who wasn't part of the Hart family machine. Lucas? I blinked. What are you doing in a public library at 11 p.m.? He smiled, that same warm smile I remembered. I could ask you the same thing. Something tells me you're not here for the romance novels. I closed my laptop. We talked for 2 hours in the library's corner cafe. I told him everything. Not all of it, but enough. The betrayal. The escape. The plans I was quietly building. To my surprise, Lucas didn't judge. Didn't pity me. Instead, he leaned back and said, I left corporate finance 3 years ago. I've been running a venture capital fund focused on undervalued startups. Small portfolio, but profitable. He paused. I invested in Verdant Energy last month. The renewable tech company. You own a piece of that? My heart stopped. How did you know? Because I know how you think. You always saw what others missed. He studied me carefully. You're building something. I can feel it. And honestly, Madeline, I've been waiting for you to become the version of yourself you were always meant to be. And what version is that? Dangerous. Lucas and I met twice a week. He brought files, research reports, market analyses. More importantly, he brought something I'd been missing, an ally who believed in me without condition. Over coffee at a corner cafe, Lucas showed me his portfolio. I have capital to invest, he explained. But I have a philosophy: I invest in people, not just ideas. I've been waiting for the right partner. Are you saying? I'm saying that if you want to scale what you're building, I can help. And if you're wondering whether I have ulterior motives, yes, I do. I want to work with someone brilliant. Someone driven. Someone I trust. He paused. It's you. It wasn't romantic, though I could see how it might eventually become that. For now, it was better. It was a meeting of minds. A true partnership. There's something you should know, I said quietly. I'm not just building businesses. I'm building towards something specific. Something connected to the people who destroyed me. Lucas nodded slowly. Tell me. I told him about Adam. About the hedge fund Adam managed, one he'd built on insider trading tips and information fed to him by our father through his corporate law connections. About Vanessa's luxury import business, funded by trust money and propped up by our parents' connections. About my family's entire empire, built not on innovation or talent, but on collusion and cruel advantage. I'm going to dismantle it, I said. Not through destruction, but through superior strategy. I'm going to build companies that outcompete theirs. I'm going to identify the illegal things they're doing and make sure the right people know. And I'm going to do it all without ever breaking a law myself. Lucas listened without interrupting. When I finished, he simply said, I'm in. When do we start? We already have. Verdant Energy was the beginning. My initial investment of $5,000 had tripled within 18 months. By year 2, the company had caught the attention of major investors. By year 3, they'd been acquired by a multinational energy corporation for $340 million. My cut, $8.2 million. I didn't celebrate. Instead, I immediately reinvested. Through Lucas's fund, I identified 3 more undervalued companies operating in spaces adjacent to, and in direct competition with, Adam's hedge fund portfolio. I learned something crucial during those years: my family's money wasn't real wealth. It was propped up by their network, by insider information, by the kind of confidence that comes from never being told a no. Real wealth was built differently. It was patient. Strategic. Based on understanding market forces and human psychology better than your competition. My family didn't understand either. By year 3, my net worth had reached $28 million. I owned a small apartment in the city, nothing ostentatious, nothing that would flag on society pages. I dressed well, but not expensively. I cultivated anonymity while building empire. Lucas remained my partner, though the nature of our partnership had shifted. We saw each other 3 times a week now. We held hands. But neither of us acknowledged it. We were too focused on the game we were playing. Vanessa's business is failing, he told me one evening, sliding a folder across the table. They've expanded too quickly, overextended themselves. They're looking for an emergency investor. I studied the financials. Vanessa's luxury import company was hemorrhaging money. They'd invested in a new warehouse, hired too many staff, made decisions based on emotion rather than analysis. They'll come to me, I said. Or rather, they'll come to whoever's representing me. I'm ready for that. But I wasn't. The market crashed. A sector I'd heavily invested in, tech startups in the AI space, collapsed when a major player filed for bankruptcy, taking investor confidence with it. In 1 week, I lost $6.3 million. I sat in my apartment, looking at the numbers on my laptop screen, and felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel since the day I'd left: panic. What if I wasn't special? What if I was just lucky? What if, the moment things got hard, I'd prove my family right, prove that I was weak, fragile, dispensable? Lucas came over that night. I didn't call him, he just appeared, knowing something was wrong the way people who truly know you always do. Talk to me, he said, sitting beside me on my couch. I told him. All of it. The loss. The self-doubt. The creeping fear that maybe I wasn't as brilliant as I thought, maybe I was just an angry girl playing pretend at building an empire. Lucas listened. Then he said something that changed everything. You know what separates people who build real wealth from people who don't? It's not intelligence. It's not luck. It's the ability to lose big and keep moving. I'm terrified, I admitted. Good, he said. That means you understand the stakes. Now, are you going to let fear stop you, or are you going to figure out what you did wrong and fix it? Fix it? You invested too heavily in one sector. You got emotionally attached to the idea of AI disruption. You forgot your own rules: diversify, hedge your bets, never fall in love with your thesis. He pulled out a tablet. Look. We're still up $16 million net from where we started. You didn't lose everything. You lost a battle. So now we reassess. It took me 3 days to see it. To understand that this setback wasn't a failure, it was an education. And more than that, it was necessary. Because my family had never experienced failure. They'd been coddled, protected, propped up by systems designed to favor them. I had learned resilience. And that was far more valuable. By year 4, I was unrecognizable. Not because of surgery or drastic changes, but because I'd finally become the person I was always supposed to be. My posture had shifted, shoulders square, spine straight. I walked into rooms and people noticed. Not because I was loud, but because I carried myself like someone who knew their own power. My hair was cut short and sharp. My wardrobe consisted of designer pieces, but understated, the kind of wealth that doesn't need to announce itself. I wore my grandmother's pearl necklace, not out of nostalgia, but as a daily reminder that some people had always believed in me. More than anything, my eyes had changed. They held something my family had never seen before: absolute clarity about what I was capable of. Lucas and I got engaged on a Tuesday evening. No proposal, no drama. We'd simply been talking about moving to a larger apartment, and he'd said, we should probably get married first. I'd agreed, and we'd picked out rings the next day. Our families didn't matter. We only needed each other. By year 5, my net worth exceeded $140 million. Most people had no idea who I was. A few in finance circles knew the name Madeline Hart as an exceptionally shrewd investor with a talent for identifying undervalued assets. None of them knew the connection to the Hart family empire. I'd been patient. Methodical. I'd watched and waited as my family's house of cards wobbled. Adam's hedge fund had faced 3 SEC investigations in the past 2 years. Nothing had stuck, yet. But I'd been feeding information to the right people. Anonymous tips. Documented evidence. Nothing traceable to me. Vanessa had declared bankruptcy last month. Her business had collapsed, and I'd quietly purchased her assets, her client list, her relationships, her contracts, for pennies on the dollar. I was now, technically, her employer. She'd called me in tears, not recognizing the voice of the sister she'd betrayed, asking for a job. I'd had Lucas's assistant send her an interview appointment. My parents' law firm was under review by the State Bar Association. Again, nothing I'd directly orchestrated. Just the inevitable consequence of decades of cutting corners and ethical compromises. They were beginning to realize that the ground beneath them was no longer solid. And they still had no idea it was me. The gala was at the Metropolitan Hotel, the same one where I'd spent years standing at my mother's elbow, invisible and small. This year, I arrived as an invited guest in my own right. A prominent investor. A self-made success story. Heads turned when I walked in. Lucas was at my side, handsome in his tailored tuxedo. My engagement ring, a simple 2-carat diamond, caught the light as I accepted a champagne flute. And then I saw them. Adam, looking haggard and thin. He'd aged 5 years in 5. His face had a desperate quality I'd never seen before. Vanessa stood nearby, her designer dress hanging loose on her frame. No designer jewels tonight, I suspected she'd sold them. My parents sat at one of the center tables, their usual imperious expressions replaced by something brittle and afraid. The announcement came during dessert. The gala's organizer, a dear friend of mine, actually, though my family didn't know that, stepped to the podium. Before we conclude this evening, I'd like to introduce our principal benefactor and largest donor to this year's gala. Please join me in welcoming Madeline Hart, whose philanthropic foundation has donated $15 million to support education initiatives this year. The room erupted in applause. People stood. My mother's face went absolutely white. I stood, smiled graciously, and walked to the podium. Thank you, I said, my voice steady and clear. I believe in investing in people. In their potential. In believing in them when they don't believe in themselves. I paused, making eye contact with my family across the ballroom. That's what separates those who build real legacies from those who simply inherit them. The applause was thunderous. Within 2 weeks, Forbes ran an article, The Rise of Madeline Hart, How One Woman Built a $200 million Empire in 5 Years. Within a month, the story went viral. The narrative was perfect: betrayed wife escapes abusive family, builds empire through intelligence and determination, becomes philanthropic force. Better yet, my family was recognizable to society pages, which meant the subtext was impossible to miss. My parents' law firm lost 3 major clients who quietly withdrew their business. Why? Because association with a family member embroiled in recent unfortunate circumstances was bad for reputation. Adam's hedge fund was formally investigated by the SEC. Evidence had surfaced, anonymous tips that proved he'd been using material non-public information. He was facing charges. Vanessa was now working as an account manager at my acquisition company. She had no idea who her boss actually was until the day I called her into my office. Vanessa sat across from me, smoothing her shirt nervously. She'd lost weight. The cruelty had been replaced by desperation. I wanted to meet with you personally, I began, because I think it's time you understood the woman you've been reporting to. I stood and walked to the window overlooking the city. From this height, my family's neighborhood was barely visible. I transcended that world entirely. Do you remember the penthouse? 7 years ago? I turned back to face her. The couch? She went pale. The coffee cup in her hands began to tremble. Madeline? Hello, sister. For a long moment, she couldn't speak. Tears began streaming down her face, not of sadness, but something rawer. The understanding of what she'd done. What she'd lost. How completely she'd underestimated someone she'd spent her entire life dismissing. I can't. I know, I said quietly. You thought I was weak. Fragile. That you could destroy me and I'd stay destroyed. That our parents had made the right choice in choosing you. I paused. You were wrong. Madeline, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know, I was young and stupid, Anne. I'm not interested in your apology, I said, but not unkindly. I'm interested in you understanding that every choice has consequences. You made a choice 7 years ago. It's taken me 5 years to fully collect on that debt. And now, as my employee, you have the opportunity to spend the next decade understanding what it means to work for someone whose standards you can never meet. I handed her a new contract. Updated terms. You're being transferred to our office in Denver. Congratulations on your promotion. You'll be managing a regional team. Denver. The farthest possible branch from anyone she cared about. The same isolation she'd helped inflict on me. She took the contract with shaking hands. Just so you understand, I continued, you'll be reporting directly to one of our board members, Lucas Chin. Any inappropriate behavior, any attempt to leverage your family connections for personal gain, and you'll be terminated. Immediately. No severance. No reference. She nodded numbly. You can go. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. Was all of this just to hurt us? I considered the question honestly. Initially? Yes. But then I realized something. Hurting you wasn't actually the goal. Transcending you was. Building something so magnificent that you'd spend the rest of your life knowing you were small enough to be left behind by someone you tried to destroy. I smiled. This is just the consequence you get to live with. 6 months later, my family's entire empire had restructured. Adam took a plea deal rather than face trial. 18 months in federal prison, substantial fines. His hedge fund was dissolved. His reputation was permanently destroyed. My father's law firm merged with a larger firm that stripped his name from the letterhead. He maintained his title but had lost all meaningful power. My mother had a breakdown, a real one, not performative, and spent 3 months in a psychiatric facility. She emerged quieter, smaller, shaken. I didn't visit. But I didn't celebrate either. Because something unexpected had happened during my rise, I'd stopped thinking about their downfall and started thinking about what I was actually building. My foundation had funded education initiatives that had changed 12,000 lives. My investment portfolio had created jobs, supported innovation, accelerated solutions to climate change. I'd become the antithesis of everything my family represented, not old money clinging to power, but new force building the future. Lucas and I were married in a small ceremony on a cliff overlooking the ocean. Just 50 people, the ones we actually loved. My grandmother's closest friends came. Lucas's entire family, warm and welcoming in a way mine had never been. Colleagues and mentors who'd become true friends. We didn't invite my family. They would never have come anyway. On our honeymoon, 2 weeks in Tuscany, Lucas asked me something I'd been avoiding. Do you feel vindicated? I was silent for a long time. We were sitting in a small vineyard, watching the sunset paint the hills in shades of amber and rose. Vindicated? I repeated. No. I feel complete. Like I spent 7 years as a fractured version of myself, and now I'm whole. The vindication was just the bridge I needed to cross. You don't regret any of it? He asked carefully. The revenge? I regret that I needed it, I said honestly. If they'd simply let me go, if they'd been kind in the ending, I wouldn't have needed to become this ruthless version of myself. But they didn't. So I became what was necessary. Lucas took my hand. You were always this strong. They just never gave you the space to discover it. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I needed the darkness to make my light visible. I was 35 years old when Billionaire magazine named me one of the 50 most influential people in finance. The photo showed me standing on the balcony of my penthouse, not the one where Adam had betrayed me, but a different one, in a different city, where I'd built my life on my own terms. The article detailed my rise without sensationalism. It spoke of my investment philosophy, my philanthropic approach, my controversial decision to publicly support transparency in venture capitalism, which had made certain industry players uncomfortable. It did not mention my family. That story, my story, belonged to me now. Not to them, not to the narrative of betrayal and revenge. I transcended it entirely. The morning the article came out, I received an email. From my mother. I almost deleted it, but something made me open it. Madeline. I don't expect you to respond to this. I don't deserve a response. But I wanted you to know that I've read the article. I watched the interview they did with you. I listened to you talk about building rather than destroying, creating rather than taking. And I realized, you became the woman we tried to prevent you from becoming. We were so afraid you'd outshine us that we tried to make you small. And you became so much larger than we could have ever imagined. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I see you now. The woman you always were. I'm proud of you. I should have been proud of you all along. Mom. I read it 3 times. Then I forwarded it to Lucas with no message attached. He called me immediately. Are you okay? He asked. I don't know, I said honestly. She hurt me. Terribly. And she's never going to truly understand why, or what it cost me to become this version of myself. But she's trying. And that's something. That's more than I thought would ever happen. Do you want to respond? I thought about it. Then I wrote a single line and sent it. Thank you. I hope someday you'll understand that this wasn't about you. It was about me finding myself. My foundation now operated in 40 countries. We funded STEM education for underrepresented women. We invested in female entrepreneurs in developing nations. We built something meaningful out of the rubble of my shattered life. Vanessa eventually became an exceptionally capable regional manager. She was never going to be brilliant, but she was competent, which was more than she'd ever achieved before. One day, years later, she approached me at a company event. I owe you an apology, she said quietly. Yes, I agreed. You do. I know nothing I say can undo what I did. But I wanted you to know that working here has changed me. Being around you, watching how you lead, how you treat people with integrity even when you have every reason not to. She paused, struggling. You're everything I could have been if I'd just tried. Instead of taking. You still can be, I said. And I meant it. You're not who you were 7 years ago. Neither are you. No, I agreed. I'm not. But I had to become someone harder to survive. Now I'm trying to become someone better. On the 10th anniversary of my escape, I gave an interview to the Times. The article was titled, "The Woman Who Built an Empire from Ashes, Madeline Hart on Betrayal, Revenge, and Transcendence." In it, I spoke honestly for the first time about my family. About the betrayal. About the years of calculated dismantling. About the moment I realized that my best revenge wasn't destruction, but evolution. People ask me if I regret it, I said in the interview. The revenge. The years of strategic positioning. And the truth is complicated. I don't regret becoming this version of myself. I don't regret holding people accountable for the harm they caused. But I do regret that it had to be so calculated, so cold. The interviewer asked, "Do you have a message for your family?" I paused for a long moment, considering. Yes, I said finally. I'd tell them what I wish I'd known at 25, your pain is valid. Your anger is valid. But don't let it build your entire existence. Let it teach you. Let it transform you. But don't let it consume you. Because the moment your revenge becomes your purpose, you've given them more power than they ever had. And did you let revenge consume you? The interviewer pressed. For a time, I admitted. For 5 years, I built an empire on the bones of their mistakes. But then I realized my empire was too important to be defined by their destruction. So I shifted my focus. I stopped building against them and started building for something. For what? For everyone else trying to escape their own version of this story. For the women told they're too fragile to succeed. For the children abandoned by families that couldn't see their worth. For the dreamers trying to build something real in a world built on collusion and privilege. I stood in my office on the 42nd floor, looking out at the city that had become my home. A city I'd rebuilt myself in, where I was no longer the invisible Hart daughter, but Madeline Hart, founder, investor, philanthropist, visionary. Lucas came in with our toddler balanced on his hip, a daughter we'd named Helen, after my grandmother. The woman who'd believed in me first. Ready for tonight? He asked. Tonight was the opening of a new community center funded by my foundation. In my family's old neighborhood. Built on the site of the church where my mother had spent Sundays, congratulating herself on her moral superiority while her daughter bled silently at home. More than ready, I said. I kissed my husband and my daughter, and I looked at the city below, a city I'd conquered not with anger, but with intelligence, patience, and an unwavering belief in myself. My family thought they'd made me small. Instead, they'd made me fierce. My family thought they'd destroyed me. Instead, they'd created the architect of my own transcendence. And that, I understood now, was the greatest revenge, to become so monumentally successful, so undeniably brilliant, so authentically happy, that their jealousy and regret became their own personal hell. I had one. Not because I'd destroyed them, but because I'd built something so magnificent that they'd spend the rest of their lives knowing they'd thrown away the person most capable of creating it. I stood paralyzed on that night, watching my family celebrate my destruction. I thought invisibility meant I didn't matter. I was wrong. Invisibility became my greatest weapon. While they laughed, I was learning. While they whispered, I was building. Respect isn't given by people who never saw your worth, it's claimed by those brave enough to become undeniable. I didn't need their approval. I needed their disbelief. Your silence doesn't make you weak. Your refusal to beg for love from people incapable of giving it makes you dangerous. My boundaries weren't difficult, they were revolutionary. Every time you said no to people who exploited your patience, you were writing your own story. Every strategic decision I made, every bridge I burned, every moment I chose myself over their comfort, that was transcendence, not revenge. You don't have to scream to be heard. If this resonated with you, share it with someone gaslit into invisibility. Tell them your worth was never in question. It was only waiting to be remembered. Subscribe for more stories about setting boundaries, building empires, and turning humiliation into triumph. Because the real revolution happens when you decide to write your own ending. Your turn is coming.